Right now, as you're watching this, over 400 oil tankers are sitting dead in the water. Not moving, not loading, not unloading. Just floating in the Persian Gulf like ghost ships carrying $11 billion worth of oil that has nowhere to go. And here's the thing that nobody saw coming. For 40 years, the world's biggest oil producers spent over $100 billion building a backup plan. Massive pipelines, state-of-the-art terminals, underground storage. All of it was designed for exactly this moment, the day Iran would shut down the Strait of Hormuz. That day came 3 weeks ago. The backup plan activated immediately. And within 72 hours, everyone realized something terrifying. It's not working. The $100 billion insurance policy just bounced. So the question everyone's asking is simple. How did we get this so wrong? Let me take you back to where this all started, because the story of these pipelines is actually a story about a bet. A massive, expensive 40-year bet that turned out to be based on the wrong assumptions. It's 1979. The Iranian Revolution just happened. The Soviet Union just invaded Afghanistan. And Saudi Arabia is looking at a map, realizing that almost all of their oil, the stuff that keeps their entire economy running, has to squeeze through this tiny 21-mile wide waterway called the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran ever decided to close it, Saudi Arabia would be finished. So King Khalid makes a decision. Build a pipeline, a big one, 1,200 kilometers across the entire Arabian Peninsula, from the oil fields in the east to a port on the Red Sea in the west. Completely bypass Hormuz. They finished it in 1981. Cost $2.5 billion, which is over $8 billion in today's money. It was called the East-West Pipeline, or Petroline, and the thinking was brilliant. If Hormuz ever gets shut down, we'll just pump the oil across the desert and ship it from the Red Sea instead. But here's where things get interesting. The Saudis didn't build it big enough to replace Hormuz entirely. The pipeline could move 5 million barrels a day. Sounds like a lot, right? Except Saudi Arabia alone was exporting 7 million barrels a day through Hormuz. And that's just Saudi Arabia. The entire Gulf region was moving 20 million barrels a day through that strait. So why didn't they build it bigger? Because they were making a calculated bet. They assumed that any closure of Hormuz would be temporary, days, maybe weeks at most, just enough time to ride it out with backup capacity and strategic reserves. Nobody builds infrastructure for a scenario that might never happen. The United Arab Emirates made the same calculation. In 2012, they finished their own bypass pipeline, the Abu Dhabi Crude Oil Pipeline, or ADCOP, 380 kilometers from their inland oil fields to the port of Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman, completely outside the Strait of Hormuz. Cost, $4.2 billion. Capacity, 1.8 million barrels a day. Once again, not nearly enough to replace what they were shipping through Hormuz, but enough to keep some oil flowing during a short disruption. Add them together, the Saudi pipeline and the UAE pipeline, and you've got about 9 million barrels a day of bypass capacity. Still less than half of what normally moves through Hormuz. But again, the bet was that this would never be tested for more than a few weeks. Fast forward to February 28th, 2026. The United States and Israel launch airstrikes that kill Iran's supreme leader. Iran retaliates by effectively closing the Strait of Hormuz. Ships start getting hit by drones. Mines appear in the water. Insurance companies pull coverage. Within days, shipping traffic drops 97%. And this is when the Saudis and Emirates activate their backup plan. The East-West pipeline ramps up to maximum capacity. Saudi Arabia starts converting their natural gas pipelines to carry more crude oil. Within a week, they're pushing 7 million barrels a day through Petroline to the Red Sea port of Yanbu. The UAE maxes out ADCOP. They're running at full capacity, sending 1.8 million barrels to Fujairah. On paper, it's working. 9 million barrels a day is flowing out through these bypass routes. That's a massive achievement. These pipelines are doing exactly what they were designed to do. But then the math hits. 9 million barrels is less than half of what the Gulf was shipping before. Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Iraq, they don't have bypass pipelines. Their oil is completely trapped. Kuwait declared force majeure on March 7th. All crude exports stopped. Qatar shut down the world's largest liquefied natural gas complex. 20% of global LNG supply gone overnight. The gap is devastating. 11 to 15 million barrels a day of oil that used to move through Hormuz is now just sitting there with nowhere to go. And here's the part that's really crushing global markets. It's not just crude oil, it's refined products. See, the bypass pipelines were designed to move crude oil, the raw stuff that comes out of the ground. But the Gulf also exports massive amounts of diesel, jet fuel, and other refined products. Europe was getting 30% of its diesel and half of its jet fuel from Middle Eastern refineries. Those products can't go through the bypass pipelines. They need ships, and the ships can't get through Hormuz. So even though Saudi Arabia is successfully moving crude oil to the Red Sea, they can't fulfill their contracts for refined products. Europe's facing a diesel crisis. Asia's scrambling for jet fuel, and the pipelines can't help because they were never built for that. Now, if you look closely at what's happening, you'll see the real problem. This isn't just about capacity, it's about what Iran is doing with that capacity. Because Iran didn't just close Hormuz and wait. They immediately started targeting the exit points of these bypass pipelines. On March 1st, drones hit Duqm port in Oman. March 3rd, drones struck a fuel storage tank at Fujairah. That's the UAE's bypass port. Fires broke out. Capacity got damaged. Think about the strategy here. Iran spent 40 years watching these pipelines get built. They knew exactly where the weak points were, not the pipelines themselves. Those are buried in the desert, hundreds of kilometers long, nearly impossible to hit. But the ports, the loading terminals, the storage tanks, those are sitting targets. And it gets worse. The East-West pipeline was upgraded and expanded multiple times over the decades. But all of those upgrades happened before drones revolutionized warfare. The entire bypass system was designed for a different era, when closing a port meant sending jets or missiles, not cheap commercial drones that cost $5,000 each. Iran can produce 10,000 drones a month. They've already proven they can hit specific targets across the Gulf. The insurance that was supposed to make the bypass routes safer? It's gone. War risk insurance premiums spiked 50% before the companies just pulled out entirely. So what's the real cost here? Not just the $100 billion spent on infrastructure over 40 years. It's the $2.1 billion the global economy is losing every single day. These ships sit idle. It's oil prices that shot past $120 a barrel. It's the risk of a global recession if this continues. And here's what nobody wants to say out loud. There's no quick fix. Trump's calling for a naval coalition to escort ships through Hormuz. But analysts are saying you'd need 7 to 8 destroyers just to move 3 or 4 ships a day. There are 400 ships stuck in the Gulf. At that rate, it would take months to clear the backlog. Even if they somehow neutralized every Iranian drone, every mine, every missile battery, the insurance market has fled. Ships legally can't operate without insurance. Their flag states won't allow it. So you'd need to rebuild the entire insurance framework while simultaneously conducting the largest naval escort operation since World War II. The Saudis and Emirates are doing everything right with what they have. The pipelines are running at maximum capacity. They're using their strategic reserves. They're coordinating with customers to redirect supply chains. But the infrastructure simply wasn't built to replace Hormuz for an extended period. It was insurance against a short-term crisis. What they're facing now is a long-term siege. And that's the brutal lesson emerging from this crisis. You can't half-build a backup plan. Either the infrastructure can fully replace what you're backing up, or it can't. There's no middle ground when the primary route is completely shut down and the alternative is under active attack. The question energy planners are going to be asking for the next decade is this. Was the original bet defensible, or should they have built full replacement capacity from the start? For 40 years, building partial bypass capacity made economic sense. The threat seemed manageable. The cost of building infrastructure to fully replace 20 million barrels a day of Hormuz traffic would have been astronomical, probably hundreds of billions more. But now, with $11 billion worth of oil sitting trapped in the Gulf, with global oil prices threatening to trigger a recession, with diesel and jet fuel shortages spreading across Europe and Asia, that calculation looks very different, because the cost of not having full bypass capacity isn't just measured in the infrastructure you didn't build. It's measured in the economic damage happening right now, in real time, with no end in sight. The $100 billion plan to bypass the Strait of Hormuz isn't failing because it was poorly designed. It's failing because it was designed for the wrong scenario, and the world is paying the price.